1. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, resources are scarce and life is hard as is given inflation and increasing conflict all around the world. As a consequence, schools are no exception to these economic realities, and we think that this definitely affects the ability of higher educations to be able to function and operate. Things like being able to improve their facilities to help students be able to do better in their courses, or even expand and create new branches to be able to help expand their reach to other parts of the country. Which is why we actually see a huge problem and gap between Ivy League universities who have huge endowment funds and degrees of funding and other normal colleges and universities who have a shoestring budget and are essentially inferior in terms of their ability to create better facilities and also to be connected in terms of their need to corporations and networks. We also see a huge gap with government funded and government run state universities and college, and those things are essentially seen as lesser tier and lesser quality compared to private schools, which on average are better quality. This actually puts the Ministry of Education and like the Department of Education in so much burden to have to be able to raise equal funding and proportionate funding to all of these schools, which is why I think the increased and meaningful involvement of corporate sponsors, whether that be through direct ownership, whether that be through grants and sponsorships, whether that be through money and creating facilities, is good, and we want that to happen more. This is a value judgment debate about the extent of corporate sponsorships and not just about whether or not corporate sponsorships are good or bad. A few key points of framing to also serve as expanding this debate. Number one, we need to understand that corporate sponsorships, like what the previous speaker mentioned, isn't just about, yo, we're gonna get stake and ownership in your school, and then boom, we're gonna tell you what to do, we're gonna wreck things because we're greedy. I think that the nature of corporate sponsorships, sure, it can be in terms of like direct equity, albeit that's kind of rare, but in many instances, it can be in terms of giving money or rights to their company to be able to like set up a new kind of facility, or even donate or partner in terms of kind, like, hey, we're gonna give students free access to like this medical or legal software that they need in order to be able to do their coursework, and in exchange you can like, I don't know, give us the email list of students so we can like include them in our marketing. That's oftentimes the nature of how these corporate kinds of sponsorships go. I think that these different kinds of involvement are good and gives them a plurality of ways to be able to structure the deal. Second thing I want to say, which is a flip and direct response to the previous speaker, is that if these corporations, big or small, are so motivated by cash flow and profitability, this in and of itself gives them a incentive to do this thing well, right? It's not like they're gonna put so much money just so that they can run it to the ground or influence it to the ground. In fact, I agree with the previous speaker. They're also so concerned with their optics and stuff that they're likely not to do anything like insanely sketchy, especially because they're dealing with schools, right? This isn't just like any form of deal that they do. The nature is that a lot of these corporations like doing these partnerships with schools because it increases their optics and increases their corporate social responsibility, wherein they can say, yo, not only are we a functioning company like Nestle, Procter & Gamble, and Unilever, or a huge bank, but we also give students internships, and we recently built them a new facility called like the Nestle auditorium or the Procter & Gamble research facility. I think that an increased involvement looks like doing these things more and being able to lower the barriers of negotiation so that schools of all sizes are able to partake of that. Before I move on, I'll take the POI.
Yes, you mentioned in your opening speech yourself that Ivy Leagues have a substantial amount of more funding and hence they're conceived as being superior. Isn't that the exact point that the government is trying to make, that some schools are getting more amount of funding and then are becoming more superior, and this is becoming a
Yeah, the POI is too long. I get your point. I don't think it's our burden to be like, yo, man, all schools are going to be fair and equal. Definitely, Ivy Leagues will still shrek because they're Ivy League. But we're able to level up the quality of community colleges, state universities and colleges, and all other kinds of higher educational institutions to, on average, become better. Because, on the comparative, if you have less involvement of these corporate sponsors, then the question I have is, how will these smaller universities be able to compete and be able to raise money, especially since they don't really have a huge network of really successful Silicon Valley alumni? You get three impacts coming from what I mentioned so far. Number one, you get better funded materially in terms of increasing the quality of life for students, wherein you're literally able to expand, you're able to build things, and you're able to use the money they give you in order to be able to do better things for students, and this increases the quality of life and access. The second thing I have to say is that you bridge the theory between books and reality, wherein a meaningful negotiation can happen to also be like, hey, we want to be able to help you fill in the job placements you have. Here's the resumes and CVs of our recent graduates. Here are a bunch of those who got Latin honors or like Dean's List and all these awards. You can prioritize them first. It becomes a mutually beneficial capital incentive structure for the school admin, the corporations trying to hire them, and a lot of these college students who are taking their undergrad, master's, or PhD to be able to find industry partners or be able to do things like take on meaningful internships when you have a direct relation to them, when you're able to be more involved. Lastly, what we're able to do is really equip these particular schools to be able to compete better with each other when we give them the plurality of access to corporations, whether they're startups, whether they're mid-sized, whether they're big, to be able to meaningfully negotiate and try to find out what deals can we do to be able to make things better for both of us. Ladies and gentlemen, if we want to give the average student a chance at being able to have a quality education and higher education, we need money. We are very proud to stand on side negative.